Good afternoon and welcome back to Trollop Fringe. Well, I say afternoon, but autumn is starting to creep in to Trollop this afternoon, and it feels a little bit more like evening. But there are more events to come today, that's for sure. My name is Dominic Williams. I'm a writer from Wales, and what I'd like to do today is introduce my friend Milica Denkovic.
Hello.
Milica is a digital artist. A multimedia artist, I would say. That phrase tends to be overused. You know, people talk about multimedia very, very quickly. But my experience of knowing Milica over the last 2 years, 3 years, I've seen her changing and using all sorts of different disciplines to express herself. Milica comes from Novi Sad in Serbia, and the question that Milica was not expecting, the first one I'm going to throw at you, is what are you doing tomorrow? What are you doing tomorrow night?
Oh, tomorrow night I will read my poetry with some punks, local punks and international punks, I think.
Yeah.
It's an event of different, there will be different bands there, and one band is actually ad hoc band created after the punk project, Punk Letters. I think it was 2020, right?
It was in the pandemic, and so it's one long period, isn't it? 20 and 21 come together.
2020, after international punk project, which was dealing with punk archive letters, punk archive letters. We just the artists from the project and the local punks from Tranas created ad hoc band called Unbearable Error. And we started doing punk and poetry, which is like not quite the usual mix, I think.
Yeah, it kind of surprised me when I first heard it. You know, it was Lurken's idea, the guitarist, and he started the idea, and we were here actually. We were just in the kitchen, weren't we, over at the back of this room where we first started jamming and putting together some tracks. I don't know. We were reading poetry, and Lurken was playing his guitar. And the name of the band again?
The Unbearable Error comes from my poem called Glitch. So I also write slam poetry. So in this punk and poetry project, there will be a standard poetry to slam poetry. In this slam poetry called The Glitch, I called myself The Glitch because I'm not standard woman, and I called myself Unbearable Error for Particle Society.
Yeah,
that's why that.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I mean, we were working on translating that, and I just, that line, Unbearable Error, is just that putting those two words together is just beautiful, beautiful poetry in English. You know, I didn't discover those words until we translated it from the Serbian, and then we came across those words. But yeah, you talk about slam poetry. You said, "Oh, I've got some slam poetry." Glitch of one of which. What do you decide is slam poetry and what is not slam poetry? What in your head are the different types of poetry that you write?
That's sometimes mixed, but sometimes the divide is when I use more direct style with a little bit of metaphors, not so it's easy to translate it. Mm-hmm. So it's more direct, more different type of people can have approach to it. And sometimes I write something that is not, or maybe it doesn't have rhythmics. If it doesn't have the rhythmics or it's open verse, then it's not slam for me. But in slam, I sometimes have a repetition. Sometimes because it's something that you have to remember. I have a poem 5 minutes, so it's 5 minutes for you, it's 5 minutes for you, it's 5 minutes for you. And in between, I put the sentences which explain why that 5 minutes is going on nerves that somebody tells me. That poem is about being a photographer and an artist. So people usually come to the artist and say, "Can you do that for me?" Or like, "It's 5 minutes for you," like, and they don't expect to pay you something. That's why that poem has to have that 5 minutes and it's slam, because you have just that's 5 minutes for you, and you have explanations what that's 5 minutes meaning for me, for my life, for if you are in visual arts for so many years and somebody tells you that's 5 minutes for you, it's not 5 minutes.
No, it's no people taking advantage, I guess. But you also said that it's easy to translate, and I don't think you meant necessarily easy to translate from Serbian to another language, but easy to translate in people's minds, in the listener, that it's accessible, that they don't have to try and understand complicated messages. You're talking directly to the audience.
Yes, it's not the message is pretty direct. There is nothing much, because working experience of artists worldwide they will recognize what is it. It's direct message, taking it to direct form of speaking, but I like also with metaphor stuff, but that's more for that kind of poetry I used because I started to write a book, and that kind of poetry I used to describe my childhood. So it's between, it's not a slam, it's some kind of short poetry. It's like describing photographies or shots or moments. And in that terms, I don't feel like using slam in that, but for me right now, who I am and who I try to be, slam is more open and approachable. But I also write some different kind of poems which are more emotionally calmer, but also deep. Because slam is sometimes too direct, and you say, "Okay, I'm not good with this. I want to change this, or I think about myself like this." But sometimes you need some more subtle language to deal with some subtle layers.
Well, I think you described slam. Well, you said you use repetition. You use some techniques that help you remember the poem. So you're clearly thinking about performing it. You're thinking about it's going to be a slam poem. It's going to be something that I
yes. There are some techniques of remembering, like you have you use one word from text or from verse to remember it, or colors or stuff. So sometimes I think about of performing it. And sometimes I write if it's a situation that I think it has to be in the poem because it's important to me, then I'm thinking about storytelling. So every verse is like a little bit of also pictures. So I know what is going on, and it's easy then to remember. While if it's some abstract poem with a lot of metaphors, it's not so easy for me to. If I imagine it like a film, it's easy to remember.
And we're getting. I'm really pleased that we're getting into your mind now, because this idea of how you think of things as pictures, you think of words as pictures, you think of images. You made me think about it when you said that you're writing some poems, some of your poems that you describe as not slam. Some of them are short, and you describe those as kind of like moments trying to capture a picture. So that's interesting, and I think that comes across in all of your work, honestly, in your photography, in your filmmaking, in your what we might call abstract art. This idea of trying to use words and use image as well. I think that's you. Tell me more though about some of the poems that you're writing, because you said that a slam poem has a story, but also you said that the book that you're working on is about your childhood. So there's a narrative there as well, I guess.
Yeah, that's actually I can explain one. I don't have that in. I don't remember it by heart, but I just close my eyes and I remember the moments of my life, and then I explain them, because I think that for people maybe it's going to be interesting. Like one of the moments is when my grandma used to read us at the table when I have 2 sisters and a brother, and when 4 kids don't want to eat, it's pretty hard. So she would sit with us and read us novels. That's how I fell in love with literature. That's why that poem is so important to me. And actually, she would do that in the style that if we don't eat, she's going to stop. and she tries to find the spot in the book where actually it's exciting. So she stops there when we finish the meal. So after the next meal, we're already done. We want to hear what's going on, and then like, you have to eat too. So that's the poem, and I write about these things and what is important for me, and that drew me into literature. I fell in love with that. It's my mind's. I call it launching novels because it's launching as a rocket and launching you use launch. So you're feeding yourself with food and with words. It's pretty strong picture.
I love that fantastic idea of your grandmother using cliffhangers to get the kids to eat the food. You know, it's like I've got to come back for the next episode, the next meal. You know, and,
but you go after that. You go to your next meal into the library.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, what a beautiful metaphor already. Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. So launching rockets and launching novels comes again, to kind of some of your fantastic work, because I think fantasy really feeds a lot of your work, whether that's kind of crossover between fantasy and science fiction. But you do use a lot of fantasy metaphor and science fiction sort of stuff. What draws you to that sort of fantasy world, and why is that important in representing your work?
I think it's 2 different points in that. For fantasy, it's like I'm using fantasy in stuff like architecture, so maybe it's visible.
How is that looking to those of you watching Zoom?
It's pretty small.
It's good. We've got a thumbs up.
So that kind of fantasy I use to distort spaces. I like to take photographs of buildings that are important, cultural monuments. Maybe some of them are abandoned or destroyed or not, but something that's important. And I use fantasy to distort the space, so people then have another notion of that space, and that drew them to my works, because after they know what the fact that I use real spaces, then they ask what the real spaces is. So that's point where they meet. So if you want to talk about cultural monuments, how people preserve them, you can draw them with other things, and then I put together stuff, because if I'm a photographer and I like to be in the city which has all of this stuff and they are maybe destroyed or not valued as much, and you are working on works that attracting people, that kind of message that works on both, that pleases my need for fantasy, but pleases also my activism part. So I do both of things. That's how I use fantasy. For science fiction, it's something different. I used the narrative in recent work. I was on a workshop of speculative design in Pula, Croatia. So that I made the narrative and the concepts of that work. So it's bigger, complicated idea, but I will explain it little by little. So it's a workshop of speculative design. Speculative design is an area of work where you have some questions or create scenario, script, or I don't know, application or objects. So with that, you're telling a story about the future. So we designed a prototype of application, and I imagined the world where you will use that application to value your emotional intelligence and your empathy, and based on those points, you will be able to to rent a flat, to go to the university. So if you're not using that application, or if you're not have enough emotional intelligence, you will not succeed in that world. But that world also don't give you many, how do you say, I'm a lack of word.
Can you show me or show the audience the that emoticon?
Yeah.
Because I have Milica gave me a little sticker which is on my laptop, and it was this.
So
and I asked what that is, and it was kind of like, oh, it's currency. It's a bit like a digital currency, you know, like Bitcoin or something. But it's not about money. It's not about monetary value. It's about your emotional value.
Yeah, it's your emotional capital. So if you don't have it, you cannot be part of the world. But that world also don't give you any chances to be part of that if you don't have access to public health or anything, or education about emotions. So if you don't have them, and my world don't have this, so you are in a very grim world. But the idea is to make it a more broader picture. So you made into narrative what can be utopic next phase of this in the timeline of the world. What could be the next phase, the topic? What if people come to exhibition, they have to go out with some good ideas. So you put them in a grim world. So ask them how they feel with this, and if so next phase, we will have maybe 3 rooms, and last room will be something about the topic, how to be aware that we need public health, or sharing stories, or having empathy, or something like that, or should the public health be public accessible, or what's going on with all this stuff. So that's
I don't quite understand why it's a grim world. If this is the value, if emotion is how people measure their value in society, how is that grim? That sounds really utopian, actually. But are you suggesting that in this world, actually, a lot of people are emotionally poor?
No, it's grim world because you have to have points in this, and if you have to have a really big emotional intelligence. But if world doesn't give you a chance to have it, to develop it, then it's grim. Then if I have more points in that than you, I can go around, and maybe you cannot have the same life as me.
Yeah,
that's grim. I think
so. It's a transition. It's trying to make this better world.
Yeah.
But
I make people think about what if this happens, what then? So that's green part. But then you have a topic part where people will maybe not, because the first in the narration, first phase of this was something about mental health and people sharing stories. Then this part when we exhibiting this, so this is always going to be part of the same work. When exhibited, this was actually capitalization of something that people created for helping themselves.
Okay.
So next part will also be utopic. So first part is utopic, on you go to green part, and then you go also to a topic about this. And I wrote the story actually and everything for this concept.
So this is very much still a work in progress.
Yeah.
Working towards.
Yeah, because it's four of us in the team. I do creative direction, narration, concept. We have a guy who did the application, so he did the programming and JavaScript and some music, because we added some music in that application. So it's applications is like a psychotest, and then you have music that affects you sometimes. So it's also a bit of play between what you read and how your music affects you. Then we had a graphic designer and UX designer. So yeah, it's still in the progress, and it will be exhibited somewhere in Slovenia, I think in November, December.
And most of the contact between you has been digital?
Yes.
Yeah. That's a part of the pandemic, I suppose. And has that been beneficial? I mean, if you hadn't been locked down, if you had been able to travel, do you think perhaps this development process might have been slower because you were wanting to make time, arrange to get together to develop things? And because you were forced to do it digitally, did that make it faster in some ways? Or did it make you feel that we're missing out on some of the connection we should have had?
It's I think for teams, they should meet offline and online. And if you work alone, then if you're a digital artist, sometimes if you work on something that you can do it right. So, but still you need people to meet, to exchange. So I'm missing the events like exhibitions and I don't know, talks and everything. So
Yeah.
discussions sometimes.
And going to places,
Yes.
because spaces are very important to you.
Yes.
You know, and I know I work with an American writer. We run a residency, and she and her students in America kind of came up with this equation for writing place, where they say that place equals a space, a physical geographical space, plus self, where self can mean imagination or memory. So you can't write place. It's not totally objective, because when two people visit the same place or the same space, they have different experiences of that place because they bring with them their own imagination, their own memories. One person may have visited that space before, maybe new to somebody else. They may have different preconceptions. And you, I think, always bring imagination to a space far more than you rely upon your memory. You look forward with imagination.
Yeah.
And you fill those spaces.
Yeah, because I like that spaces can also have that layer of fantastic. So then you can imagine the map with all these narratives that already existed, like the memory, like history, like already fiction books. But I also put one upon that. It's not fiction, it's like fiction pictures. It's not movies. Yeah, I like that layer of the cities.
Yeah, yeah. I like that idea you just spoke about maps and cartography, because I think that that is something that you do in your creative representation of fiction, of words, often takes the form of that kind of map. And the exhibition that you currently have in Eriksberg Museum, which you are all able to go and visit if you'd like to. It runs from when till when?
Until 18 October to 22 November.
20th of November.
It's actually a month.
Yeah. And I'm going to put you on the spot now. What time can you go to the museum? Because 3 people have asked Milica, what time can I go and see your exhibition? And she can never remember when the museum was open.
10 to 12. Then they have a lunch, a break, and 1 to, wow, I forgot what is the lunch time. Maybe 8.
Well, 10 to 12, get there in the morning and don't go at lunchtime. But yes, so that's your current exhibition. I know there are some elements in that remind me of the exhibition that you had in Novistad last year, some parts. But yeah, explain what the librographics concept is.
Okay. A librographic concept is trying to see the books from different point of view. It's actually visual. Started from a video that I saw of Kurt Vonnegut explaining shapes of the stories. The shapes of the stories are actually the hero journey, but I thought maybe other books have some shapes in them, graphical. So that started with it. But I remembered that I saw earlier, some years ago, one exhibition that also was about book. The woman explored the book and get out all the colors and made it into Pantone.
The
stickers. So you had like chapters in all the colors, put it as Pantone, and so all just the colors from the book. And it was interesting because it was different. Actually, I remembered maybe your perfume started with a lot of, when I was reading it, a lot of smells. So you can just put bottles of smells and have a book.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be visual for me. So it's some of the examples that I remember now. But I think why should a book only be a game or films? Why should be something, I don't know, tactile, smell, visual, and it's not form. It's not form. It's like you can explore different types of stuff. So I did exploration about 3 types of novels. I do one with dystopian novels, where I research the space and hierarchies of societies. And in that term, I made small scenes. Maybe I can show some. You will find them.
Are these the 3-dimensional scenes?
Yeah, 3-dimensional small scenes. This is from Jose Saramago blindness. So I explore the notion of the space. They are isolated in one old asylum, and there is blind and one who are like infected. We contact with them, and it's really how people are treating the people who are different, but how they use the space to isolate them also, and what's happening in the book. And I was reading the book during pandemic also to see what the reactions are in the book on different situations.
So this is a logo representation of this three-dimensional
Yes.
Sculpture.
So that's one part of it. Second part of it is exploring fantastic novels. In the fantastic novels, I wanted to explore not to be such, because in the dystopic novels you have some of the rules of these societies, and they're explaining some of things actual. So some of these are based on facts, and in the fantastic, I just use my own imagination of the stuff described in the book. So I made the three-dimensional logos. You can use the glasses for looking at it, and becomes. So this type of fantasy logos can be created upon what people feels about the novels. Yeah. This type is between, because it's based on both, because I actually look at that as scenography. So in scenography, you have to be based on some facts, and some of this are your own interpretation, how you make that for the public accessible, maybe. And third part was actually exploring of non-linear narratives in books. So it looks like this. This one is about. It calls Asher loops, so it has some loopings in the narrative, so that's why it's like loop here and everything is jumping. So these kind of structures maybe are more set because it's kind of narrative that is more maybe fixed, and all three are like now a big part of it. And it's like for me, it's like fun to have people think differently about stuff. It goes through.
I think I'm we've been talking about your literary creative output because you're a poet, you're a writer, and now we're talking about your visual work. And I see very, very similar sort of positionings. You're looking at a novel, you're considering the messages, the significant events that take place in the narrative, and you're considering the spaces, kind of the three things that you feel are fixed. And you make a three-dimensional model of that to represent that. And then that turns into a logo. And that logo is like a visual form of your slam poetry. And then you have these far more abstract things, the three-dimensional images that are far more difficult to understand, but seem like, now I'm using metaphor. Now I'm looking at my interpretation of the novel, and I'm not going to tell you exactly what I feel, but I'm gonna allow you visually to have an idea. It's that idea of using different sensory experiences to relate the reading.
Yes.
Yeah, either visual or smell or whatever.
And the different approaches, because you said one is emotional and one is more maybe based more on intellectual stuff that you like. I want themes, I want something that's maybe defined, and something in between, like dystopic stuff that's between interpretation and fact-based stuff. Maybe that's why we called librographics, because I was inspired by infographics, but infographics are too much information. I wanted something between information, mind maps, and graphic representation, something in between. So that's kind of compromise between this whole stuff, I think.
And again, you've been very prolific over the last 2 years. We we first started communicating with each other in 2019, I think. We've been here together in Toronto, as we were saying, for 3 Octobers. We were here in October 2019 for our first residency and the punk project that Unbearable Error emerged from. We were here for the second residency in October 2020 and here now again in October 2021. And in the intervening period has been this pandemic that nobody seems to be able to put a time on, whether it was a year or whether it was 2 years. We've lost track of the numbers of the years. But during that time, you've been very prolific. And I think it's that thing in you that wants fantasy to meet fact. And I think your fascination with dystopia met fact when we went into a pandemic. You know, we found ourselves in a dystopian world in reality in many ways. Do you think?
Well, yeah, but I wasn't happy about it. But
No.
that made me do this kind of stuff where I was thinking about stuff of what is going around me and what I found in books. And yeah, this exhibition was actually a really meeting point of facts and fiction. Because I also used the materials. I was thinking about materials like plexiglass, and I used that a lot because it was so much as a distancer. Or I was thinking also about safety measures. So I put it my exhibition like between this distance was a small postament, so a distance between was 1 meter. So it was safety measures. So when people, it's not about entering the gallery because the exhibition was online, but I was thinking about overlapping reality and fiction. Yeah, that kind of because
I never realized the exhibition was only online. I mean, it was physically set up, wasn't it?
yes,
It existed, you know, in a physical space with a meter between each
yeah,
podium.
it was in physical space, but then we just took pictures of it because I wasn't sure if I want people to come because of the pandemic. So I asked them to make a photograph so we can put it online. So
And
this actually you have ability here to see that offline.
yeah, yes, yeah. Because there's some part, as you say, the exhibition has kind of three parts really, and
Yes.
one of them is a summary of that exhibition in Novi Sad.
Yes, I recreated some of the small scenes so people can see them as they exhibited.
Yeah,
It's not actual representation because I used everyday objects. The idea of these small scenes is to be created of this object that you can find in ordinary shops, Chinese shops, secondhand shops. So you can, it's a lot of secondhand shops here, so you can create it everywhere.
Yeah, that's one of the great things about Trollus, I think, is the Lopis. It's been a resource for many artists who've been here in residency. Yeah, so the pandemic, I guess, kept people in spaces where they might turn more towards digital media. And you've been making films during the pandemic in the festival that we run in Wales, the Coracle Festival, in April of 2021. We featured your short film Astronaut, which has done the circuit of European film festivals, getting shortlisted for several prizes, many of them related to special pandemic sort of awards. So tell me more about Astronaut, how you created that film and what you wanted to say with that.
The Astronaut, it started as a slam poem. So I wrote a slam poem about how people will. It's also actually from my point of view, but actually also from people that maybe in my position, so digital artists or somebody who can work from home, and it has like their space. So it's about. I imagine the rooms of people and they are and how they feel to like them. It's in their own spaces. Do they feel how they use those spaces? Do they feel calm there, or do they use their spaces workspace, or they're teaching from their spaces? And I thought that it should have, because it's about space, it should have some representation because it's actually you can maybe feel it or imagine it. So I wanted to be in the squares. So I use the same distance. So it's two, because safety measures are sometimes 1 meter, sometimes 2 meters. So I used 2 meters. So I created the square to that 2 meters, or how you say that. And in that square, actually, it was one of a lot of squares on the in this movie. There are 2 frames, and in each frame are the 20 of these squares, I think. So of both frames has a 40 squares, and 40 represents 4 days of quarantine, which are during the plague years. So they used 40 days of quarantine for the boats arriving to Venice or something. And in first frame of these 20 squares, the words appears here in these squares describing these little scenes or emotions. So it's really really simple, and maybe because it's simple, it gets a really good message. So at the last frame, you have also this lot of squares, but at the end, the last squares disappears and only words. What's gonna happen after pandemic? So the squares disappears and you only have words. So you have these squares appearing with words and just it, and it's really short. It's like a minute or something. So it's a really super short film.
Yeah, it works on so many levels as well. You know, the idea of having emotions in boxes, on a literal level, about how people were isolated during the pandemic, how even when people were out moving around, there was this social distancing, which was making people boxed in. But I love the optimism that when, you know, the greatest emotions towards the end start to be released. And
you get rid of this box.
Yeah.
But I was thinking of this box to make not a box, but I was thinking about this poem to make it more intermedia again.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about choreography, put that I will have also this box on the floor, and I will have one dancer, and I will read poetry to him so he can recreate that also in the space. And I was thinking about installation also, so have also this square, not box, square, put on the floor and recreate something with the object that I can found representing these scenes or emotions. So yeah, I'm always thinking different kind of media. How can I translate things?
Well, it's always developing. That's what I say. It really is. As I started the conversation by saying, you know, it sounds quite trite to say that Milica is a multimedia artist, but you are so interdisciplinary, and your imagination and your fascination with dystopia, your wanting to bring fantasy, it just keeps evolving into more things. And I love this idea again that as we come out of the pandemic, let's look back, let's remember the pandemic, but now we can do so not in a digital media, but in physical form. We can have a dancer in that space. So we're looking in hindsight at the pandemic by having physical performance involved.
Physical performance or physical performance in public spaces or installation in public spaces. So it's getting out of the square.
Yeah. I'm trying to think how I can direct you to seeing the astronaut film, and I think probably the way that would be quite simple is to go to the Kavoo YouTube channel, and there are playlists on the Kavoo YouTube channel. One of those playlists is the Coracle Festival from last year, and the short films that were featured are shown there, so you can go and see Astronaut, because we can't play it for you here this afternoon. I don't know. I've been excited. I've been stimulated. I love having these conversations with you, and exploring your work, getting inside your head, because I think you put things in boxes. That's how you manage to keep going and pursuing so many different projects at the same time, because you keep things in boxes in your head as well. Are there any comments from the audience? Any questions that anybody would like to address to Milica? Well, that's good, because I know we're going to be coming very soon to our next events in the program. So I look forward to seeing you back here in Caldevera in Tronos or joining us on YouTube from wherever you may be. So tack så mycket. Thank you very much, Milica.
Thank you.